allergy check.
Apparently we just steal that.
Before every round, Will is like, take care of them and
They are so boy-ass. They are boy-ass.
they are.
I love it. Okay, well, I have one thing for you. Okay, good. One of us did well impressed.
Who's F?
McKinley is there.
I appreciate it.
Can we just get a copy of the context to you after you?
My mom's so good.
And my fortune says that good things will happen to me. Okay, let's start with the background.
Is everybody good?
Yeah.
Observation 1 is background. A argument is that infectious disease prevention was a major part of the Clinton and Bush administration policies in North Africa. The B argument is reduced, it massively reduced the growth of infection rates of HIV/AIDS in Northern Africa during the extent of its application. The C argument is the program dropped off massively because of the war on terror and massive reorientation to the way that we interact with, anything we perceive as Muslim because of 9/11. The plan. The United States federal government should implement MedFlag programs targeting the HIV/AIDS pandemic in Morocco and the Western Sahara. Enjoy your copy. Thank you. Advantage 1 is disease spread. A argument is the threat of infection is increased because of a lack of development in the region. One argument is HIV/AIDS is resurging throughout Northern Africa. It's tripled infection rates in the region since 2009. The second argument is TB has been massively resurging as well because of co-infection. When you have people with decreased immune systems, that means that their TB has an ability to get access and get a foothold. Basically, the third argument is the World Health Organization says that they aren't doing any TB and HIV/AIDS treatment in the same areas. It means there's no overlap in this, and co-infection is far more possible. The fourth argument is the National Intelligence Council says co-infection means that TB will meet the death rates of HIV/AIDS by 2020 in the region. The five argument is that Morocco has a 183% increase in infection since 2001, which is an indication of a massive increase in the region specifically. B argument is North Africa as a flashpoint. One will say that the consumption of bushmeat and unsanitary medical practices make pathogen exposure a massive problem in the region because you have a lack of proper sanitation when it comes to taking care of pathogens. The second argument, though, is a lack of development and inconsistent medical care means there's sporadic drug-heavy treatment in the region, which has created drug-resistant strains of viruses and created massive problems in terms of treating those viruses. The third argument is rural development of these viruses means they have high reproductive rates because they have to guarantee success when they're introduced into a new system. Means that they have high reproduction rates because they're very often not even introduced to new areas. Means in the urban areas they'd be able to spread very rapidly. The C argument is impact. One is that HIV/AIDS and TB co-infection means risk of possibility of a global pandemic. Our arguments would cause massive death globally, but also would risk extinction because of globalization and massive overlap in what these diseases do. Functionally, you have people who have TB and have no ability to fight back with their immune systems. But we also said this would lead to massive government crackdowns to stop the spread of the disease, which would be massively dehumanizing. People who were infected would be treated as if they meant nothing because they were a threat to the government. Our second argument, though, is that would shut down the country would have to shut down trade to stop the spread of the disease. We said this would cause economic collapse because the economy may be recovering, but global economies are still not stable enough to survive a shutdown of trade, which would devastate our ability to interact with other countries, and because we'd be afraid of the spread of the disease means there would be massive risk of nuclear resource which would cause extinction. D argument is solvency. One, we say this that MedFlag is historically effective. Angola in 2005 improved, but also we say North Africa throughout the Bush administration is an indication of massive successes to prevent HIV/AIDS spread. The second argument is that this would allow for immediate action because we have MedFlag. It's Army run, it's Army doctors functionally, which means that we'd simply be able to reallocate resources that we already have given to this funding or to the programs. The third argument is. North Africa trusts MedFlag. As a region, MedFlag has been successful in the region, and the countries in that region understand that MedFlag is actually a functional program that is successful and has been successful and should in the future continue that trend. Advantage 2 is terrorism. A argument is that extremism has escalated and developed massive footholds in North Africa. The one argument is extremists do not isolate to Mali. There are extremist groups in Libya, Algeria, and even spilling over into Morocco and status quo. Our second argument is that escalation is happening. Our little A argument is that Libya doesn't really have a functioning military to check back against this extremism. Means that there are massive footholds there, and there's a lot of ability to leverage that to launch missions out of Libya and to operate out of Libya. But the B argument is Algeria proves that there's massive escalation of violence throughout their oil field regions. There are massive kidnappings and killings of people, functionally bloodbaths happening on these oil fields as terrorists fight for access to economic power. The C argument is Morocco is holding out in the status quo, but could become at risk when you have a massive influx of extremism in the region. Third argument is unique terrorist cells are developing there now. The little A argument is Islamic Maghreb, which is an Al-Qaeda affiliated group, is developing throughout northern Africa and trying to pursue terrorist action throughout the region, which is an indication of massive development of unique terrorist cells. And the little B argument is the anti-American sentiment is developing there because of the lack of intervention in Mali and the failure to support Libya through its transition. The argument. Lack of stability leads to extremism. One argument is the long-term denial of the issues in country allows for collapse. Our argument is the denial of issues in Afghanistan led to Taliban control of the country, which has devastated the country in the long term. We said that this also makes it possible for rogue states to exist when you and for weapons to be stolen from those countries. The second argument is the lack of action only legitimizes terrorism. Our argument is the lack of action in northern Africa and the problems in northern Africa makes the U.S. look like it doesn't care at all about the region, about the people there, and that Mali is not an issue, or that the HIV/AIDS pandemic that happens there is not an issue, that we should not evaluate. It only makes the West look indifferent and perceived as a problem. Third argument is terrorism is in its infancy here, which means it can only get worse. Which, that's fine. C argument is the impact. One argument will say that there's a possibility of government hijacking and the theft of weapons from those governments, which is an indication of a massive possibility for escalation of violence in the region, which we say would be dehumanizing, but also cause the possibility of an attack against Western powers. The second argument, though, is an attack against the West would necessarily lead to a response. Afghanistan proves that if there's an attack against power perceived as being tied to a single country, there would necessarily be a response to it, such as an invasion. We say this would create a global power because China has massive ties in North Africa and would seek to protect those interests against U.S. invasion, which would lead to nuclear war between the two largest powers in the world, cause nuclear extinction. The argument is soft power solves. One is that we would create a constructive outlet to resolve terrorism because we would create soft power between the United States and North Africa as a region via the plan. The second argument is the soft power is key to coalition building alliances and intel sharing, all of which check back against the development of terrorist organizations in a region and against the transport of weapons across borders. Third argument is Morocco is key because it's the last stable country in the area, which is uniquely important. The fourth argument is West Sahara is key to the development of our soft power because UNPKO have been in the region since 1991. It's an indication of massive support for global peacekeeping operations. The UN as a whole, which develops our support with throughout, not just in northern Africa, but with our European allies. The five argument is moderate Muslims would massively support the plan because it's perceived as an attempt to remedy the problems of the status quo that the West has with the northern African region of North Africa, and to attempt to resolve issues that affect these populations massively.
I am wondering how how putting mid-flags in Western Sahara and Morocco solves terrorism.
Solves terrorism? Our argument is that it will create soft power, which will allow for us to have intel sharing, monitor far better along with
I'm also wondering if mid-flags is an American program or...
It's an international program, but the United States would be heading the charge. Basically, you can set up a med flag as an international program, but a single country does it.
Okay.
So, how are you going to get MedFlag into the Western Sahara?
We would use planes. I mean,
They're not allowing U.S. aid in that region.
Our argument is that the U.S. government would, like the U.S. Army program, we can get people where they need to be.
Has this changed since National? Last year at Nationals, when I was doing this research, we can't get into the Western Sahara. They won't let the United States in that region. The refugee camps are securitized against that by the Moroccan people because they don't like them. Has that changed?
I don't know.
Okay.
You can make an argument that it hasn't.
Okay.
The order is one case.
I don't need background, do I?
No. I can test your historical facts. And Nancy Press.
should increase means to add to an existing program. Again, to add to an existing program, the violation is there's not an existing medical program in North Africa and Western Sahara or Morocco right now. We literally articulated you cannot have planes. You cannot have planes bring in medical supplies in the region and status quo. That's a question that maybe just ask the standards versus granted decrease the strength of this has links to the capital competitiveness. We don't have access to predictable office. We're forced into a stale debate like tea, and database would decrease the substantive clash. Also limits you have. There are an infinite amount of new programs that can be created. Means that it infinitely decrease the topic means that we are incapable of accessing the rare that we should be able to have access to in the heart of the topic literature within practice. This is voted for reasons of fairness and education as articulated above. We evaluate on debating interpretations. Reasonability is arbitrary. Next. What do I see? Okay. I'm missing the second page of my starting on data. First argument is the viruses are not bacteria. Obviously, they're drug resistant. Also, viruses are combated by antivirals, which create antibodies and trick the system. Which means that you're incapable of solving this because you don't want to see you. Don't articulate the medical problems in which you're going to actually solve HIV. Also, TB is not a pandemic. It's not a pandemic in Morocco and Western Sahara, and it is not affected by the plague, which means that you're incapable of solving it even if it were a pandemic. Also, MIT is solving viruses in the status quo through Dracos, which break down the RNA in the virus and reduce infinite lysogenesis until apoptosis, which means that this is being solved in the status quo through better antiviral means that exist right now. Only a risk that you cause budding trade-off and make it impossible for them to create this on an enormous scale. The first argument is that this use Western intervention, which increases the backlash and makes the U.S. look incredibly political, is especially problematic because the sex education and condoms are what solve things like HIV and AIDS, which means that it creates a cultural imposition. This creates a battle of religion versus agnosticism. This battle for superiority will turn Morocco and Western Sahara into crusade ground, streets, conflict, and disease more likely. Also, makes politicization more likely causes terrorism, which decreases economic stability and individual sort of access to drugs, which in turn links towards advantage one and advantage two. Nuclear war first. Nuclear war doesn't cause extinction. Nuclear taboo exists right now, which means that this does not happen. Also, doesn't escalate mutually assured destruction checks, and there are places that would be unaffected, like Australia and South America and Canada, which means that you don't have an extinction level scenario. Next. The Canadian Parliament should implement a MedFlags program targeting the HIV/AIDS pandemic in Morocco and the Western Sahara. Again, the Canadian Parliament should implement a MedFlags program targeting the HIV/AIDS pandemic in Morocco and Western Sahara. There should be. First is that international theater is going to test the resolution and division of grant and specific solvency. We are predictable. We have to be capable of solving the 1AC, and it's necessary to checking the elements of U.S. action. Solves first argument is that Canada started contributing to foreign aid more than the U.S. is the 10th largest aid contributor, and more than $3 million a year. And focus on facilitating economic growth and targeting programs like agriculture and loans. Yes.
Canada and the EU are the only people that are currently in the Western Sahara doing refugee work.
Yeah, Canada already has people on the ground, which means they're actually capable of distributing the medication or distributing the condoms or creating sex education programs, which means that we have better solvency than UNHCR. Also increases the focus on Africa since 2003. Since 2003, they've increased their funding from 95 million to over 500 million to targeted programs within Africa. This is for Canada to focus on human security, which is why no, I don't want that benefit. First, the Canada this is on the same page. Canada props up the Canada props up Canadian software are slow right now because they need to move on meaningfully on climate change talks, as is illustrated by these hard-stand negotiations that are happening in Nebraska right now. Also constrained through economic conditions, which means that they are unable to give money to UNPKO. So UNPKO contribution has been down lately and have been eclipsed by the U.S. presence. So they've been capable of establishing a distinct international limit, and the Canada resource as top power to developmental assistance is virtual. Part of how Canada is capable of doing their foreign power, which means that they're capable of building relations on economic development and medical assistance within a country, which means that they have a major voice internationally. They'll have credibility in organizations like the UN and World Bank. This means that the permutation also affects Canadian software because it prevents independent policies and saps Canadian attention. And it looks like part of the U.S. defense strategy, which means that Canada cannot find themselves on a new trajectory. Also, is necessary because Canada is the only G8 country to cancel debt in Africa and needs credibility to be able to do this. Debt internally links to advantage. Why? Because it doesn't allow for any sort of drug access because individuals literally not have an economy to function in, and the economic woes lead to higher terrorist group because there is not another option. There's only one organization that can give you survival or give you an option for survival. Additionally, Canada's been calling for a moratorium on debt payments in 2004, which means that we reduce the ability to put people in infinite poverty and slavery to debt countries. Next.
Are you paying attention to the current plan unconditional and not reading the third law?
Really?
Okay, now continue. Fine.
I'm just gonna read that right now. Is that okay? Framework. First, that they were animated and enforced practice of policies are changed by the methodologies that's created within the representation of the ultimate for political power lists versus the telos and telos development of the one he creates and ordering in the world based on the center for division in the way and what he assumes. There's a resistance to the logical trajectory of the nation state development. This enemy favors Western ontology of statehood and artificially creates a democracy and economic development and liberal politics that protect our entire populations to never catch up. This condemns people to a state representation that is highly that's inadequate and lacking this creates an impacts first that it creates a cycle of violence because violence even a state eventually becomes inevitable. Imposing human rights laws justifies the domination of people in our ability to, without an ability to regulate themselves and other development of others, the articulation of others speaking of development is a threat to Western infrastructure, which means that we allow them to be to work through things like Q&A. This makes all conflict, makes all conflict inevitable because it lowers the rate for conflict and creates a self-fulfilling prophecy where extinction becomes inevitable. Additionally, colonial power structures render normalization inevitable through the controlling root cause of structural violence and the logic of subjugation, which makes violence accepted. Into the state of being for the colonizer and the colonized. The alternative is vote negative as a rejection of the 1AC's logic of neocolonial ordering. Vote negative as a rejection of the 1AC's logic of neocolonial ordering. The rejection acts of the heart, which means that it fractures the neocolonial narrative and undermines the power in stopping the appearance of the institution as a neutral and independent party. This individual rejection is necessary because we are capable of truth. Everything in truth claims at the level of the individual. Also, the orientation assumes the 1AC is an advisable advocacy, which undermines the alternative known as benefit, which means that the alternative will understand will solve the root cause of their impacts. Next. Uniqueness first argument is the Republican gang advantage by Parsing published the Economic Department for Comprehensive Immigration Reform last week. Nicole Honesty said on Wednesday that the bill can be ready as early as next week, and the GOP and Democrats are cooperating on border security issues and fighting in. He is bringing the Judiciary Committee between the bipartisan population of cooperation because his GOP and Obama said this. At the top of the stock, it links to the plan has a lot of extra spending on foreign aid as supplementary funding that is reigniting the debate. They would reignite the debate over that and would halt the discussion over spending in. The GOP has foreign intervention Whitehall, which is also according to a statement by Maynard, which is because the money on intervention, which is why it's been ineffective in the past. Additionally, no lobbying for means there are only a risk that it creates conflict in internal lanes first. Now it's key for immigration reform. Last time there was a distraction which led to delay and no action on the issue, and the GOP would not backlash on immigration reform because they can't backlash on anything else. Next thing, Max. First, the immigration needs the high-tech sector. We have less than half of the high-tech sector that is necessary for coming in for U.S. universities, which needs that we don't have enough visas for foreign workers. This is key to the economy because growth in the tech sector is key to increasing efficiency and getting international contracts. Which is the flux of baby boomers retiring in our tech industry, and we're on the brink of collapse right now. And increase in consumer confidence because for every immigrant that we have, we create 5 new jobs. This increases business confidence and makes investment in new projects, which means that the U.S. is capable of surviving global collapse. Also means that it's internally to be able to have the funding that is capable of solving back advantage one.
Do you have to bring the whole impact? No.
Can you just give me a brief thesis of the criticism?
I was so for it.
Yeah, the criticism says that the way in which the 1AC engages with Africa is based in a neo-colonial mindset of ordering, which makes the violence inevitable because it's simply saying that we have a representation of what people in Africa are doing, and we contrast that with what they're supposed to do. These ideas, Western ideas of what people are supposed to do, the correct ways to solve problems, the idea that they're a threat because they can have terrorism, that they're a threat because of the disease prevention.
Why is, so on terrorism, you say it's viewed as Western intervention. Why is this viewed as Western intervention when it wasn't viewed as such previously, and when your conceding arguments would indicate that they actually would probably prefer this to dying of AIDS?
We're making arguments that say that they would prefer getting help from Canada, but we say that it increases Western intervention because this simply emboldens terrorist organizations when they can physically see the United States moving in, teaching things like sex education, teaching things like medical institutions. I have 8 more seconds if you want.
That's fine.
Stop.
It is what I said.
Topicality.
Yeah.
Case. And then I want the counter plan. And I want politics. And then I want the criticism with the alternative on job, and then I'll go in order. So we're doing On topicality, the first argument is we need MEDFAC as an existing program that exists in the status quo. The second argument, though, is that counterinterpretation increase means to send more soft power than we are in the status quo. So the counterinterpretation is we need this. We're sending more soft power than we are in the status quo. The next is the standard. We don't know. We're not going to know like any of their dissents. Additionally, they read like three positions which we're always going to be able to link to. Additionally, though, they don't have to be any proven abuse. Probably the reason why you're not going to be never going to be evaluating topicality. None of their ground arguments actually matter. They're going to link. They ran a critique. Probably a reason why they're going to have some kind of access in today's round on disease. Okay. Her first argument here is about what's this argument? Virus or bacteria?
Yeah, it's a virus, not a bacteria. It means it's drug resistant, but there's this MIT argument about how it's breaking down RNA. You need to make arguments about how we're creating drug resistance in the people, not the
Okay. Argument here is that we're creating drug resistance in the people, not the actual virus. Probably the reason why we're always going to be able to solve for this. Additionally, your arguments about MIT solving the virus from this test probably don't make sense in the world where MedFlag has uniquely been able to solve for these problems in Africa in the past. Probably the reason why they'll be able to solve right now post-plan all indications of what you're not actually getting the nuance of our arguments. Argument here is that MedFlag has been able to stop these and been able to prevent TB and HIV in Africa. You can look towards the Bush administration where it worked very effectively. You can see these increases only happen after 2009. All indications on why we're always going to be able to solve for this argument here that the mutations happen.
No risk of funding trade-off with MIT because it's Army
And there's no
funding.
risk of funding trade-off with MIT because it's Army funding, not from that. On terror. You're going to hear about U.S. intervention laws and be bad as the sex education. But Army, you can extend the MedFlag has already existed in South Africa and has previously and we had previous funding on things like family planning. Already would have seen a risk of this argument. Argument here is that we've already gone into Africa and done things like family planning, like abortion. That's what the GOP has heavily criticized. But I'll get to more on this, more in the nuance of this argument on politics. Additionally, you see that nuclear war is going to cause extinction. I think that we'd be pretty good analysis why nuclear war would inevitably cause extinction. You can look towards great powers all using their largest nuclear arsenals are all reasons why it would cause a nuclear extinction. The just cause it would stop all photosynthesis. Additionally, though, it only takes a millionth of a gram to kill an individual on the count of them. First of all, here's the United States Stars and BP. We have the MedFlag with extensive experience using and transporting resources and credibility with African nations in the status quo and NGOs. Their agencies don't have this kind of credibility or experience. Probably the reason why they wouldn't be able to solve for this. The next argument here is perm do both this, which yield a link to the disadvantage. This would yield a link to the disadvantage because it would be seen as cooperation with us and Canada. Probably the reason why legislation would never trade off. The third argument though is soft power. The first is that the U.S. focused on development and on increased relevance of Africa battling terrorism. China has been focusing on infrastructure. They have a no strings attached policy, meaning that they just do things for African nations. This has drawn in numerous African nations to cooperate with China. The second argument though is that this increases dictatorship. China uses soft power to promote governments in Zimbabwe and Ghana who have continued dictatorships. This continued presence would always lead to genocide and violence, causing disease and poverty spreads. Additionally, though, the third argument is that China uses these to negotiate deals for mining resources and deforestation. This would always be really bad. It would lead to global warming. That's because the forests in Africa are second largest, only comparable to the Amazon, who is massively being deforested in the status quo. These are the largest carbon sinks in the world. Probably the reason why global warming would run rampant. Additionally, though, your arguments here about the firm would cut Canadian software. No one asked why Canadian software is PR. Here's that the United States would always be able to check back to this. Additionally, you see that Canada's the only way to solve for the debt in Africa. Argument here, so the United States would probably solve for this debt. Additionally, though, you don't give any analysis as to why the debt in Africa is actually is an increasing problem, or any kind of impact to this argument. Probably the reason why it's not relevant. Next on politics. Pursuing years in January, the United States began negotiations and developing a new military base in Niger to accelerate drones in Africa. The second argument, though, is on February 4th, the United States Marine Corps conducted joint military exercise with Morocco and 14 other nations in Africa. The third, though, is the United States in February provided Morocco with high mobility artillery rockets. The fourth argument is all of these are more expensive and aggressive than the plan, which means that you would, and they all happened last week. Probably the reason why you would have seen any kind of this backlash happening. Fifth argument, though, is political capital. Obama's political capital is tangled with Volvo, which the GOP has engaged in an unprecedented opposition to. Obama's trying to force us through the sixth, though, is the Clutcher vote in Hagel Field last night. The Democrats are scrambling and investing all of their focus on this confirmation. The third, though, is the Obama administration must confirm the Secretary of Treasury, Interior, and Education all sucking his political capital in the South. The fourth, the next argument, though, is that there is no chance of compromise on immigration reform in the South. The GOP has drawn a line in the sand. Additionally, though, there is literally no risk of cooperation. February 13th, Banner said that Obama has done nothing to find common ground on things like the sequestration trigger. Given he's the Speaker of the House, his refusal to cooperate means that there is literally going to be no agreement now on anything. The next argument, though, there's no chance of passing. Obama has drawn the line in the sand. No, I don't want that argument. Next is term plan signals fiscal responsibility. Obama has increased his foreign aid to Africa. To resolve disease. The plan shows that that we're going to use existing programs which maintains its political capital in the context of sequestration. Probably reason why it shows that Obama's willing to work with other people and work with the Democrats. I'm okay. First one here is perm both. This creates a double meaning. The alternative cannot remedy the problem or can withstand one more instance. The second is that they see the political refusal to engage in traditional policy making, which allows structures which allows the right to dominate. The next argument goes per both plan and vacuum do the alternative. The first argument is that the representations are fluid, meaning there's no residual link. The plan just becomes a rallying cry for the movement. The two, those are representations are key to coalition building. The alternative only fractures the movement on the framework. Our first argument here is consequentialism is good. You have to evaluate the concept of your actions. You can look towards when we tried to shut down sweatshops in Southeast Asia, where we actually shut them down, but those women were inevitably sold into sex slavery. Probably the reason why you have to evaluate the consequences of your action. Additionally, though, you spoke about methodology, but our argument here is that we use as a tool to be able to evaluate what we do and evaluate the consequences of our actions. The next argument that you say that this leads to cycles of violence and justifies domination. Argument here is that we aren't creating cycles of violence. We're just trying to stop violence in this instance. Probably the reason why we're not actually creating cycles of violence. You say that we allow for conflict inevitability. There's literally no warrant to this, or any kind of link to the criticism. We do not allow for conflict. We are trying to stop conflict in these areas. Probably the reason why we're not linked to this. Additionally, though, you on solvency. You say that you subsume the entirety of the PMC and solve further root cause of the impacts. No analysis of why you're solving further cause of the analysis. Argument here is that there literally is no yeah. What do you want?
You have 5 seconds here.
We're good.
So any theory on critique? No, there was not. Just like to double check, sometimes that can you clarify this specifically? You on the top of politics, you said you're saying new military bases in Nigeria. All of the funding in Nigeria you're talking about is military funding, yes? It's not specific to medical funding?
Yeah, the Nigeria argument is about a negotiation for base development.
Okay.
What is the link to these China arguments on the permutation?
Yeah, our argument is that Canada does the plan means that the United States doesn't have a chance to access North Africa, means China has a chance to step in. Basically, China and trade. U.S. is going to China.
And what's the general impact of China in the region?
They prop up the terrible dictators, human rights violations, allow for terrorism to happen because they just don't care for the most part.
Order is going to be counterplan. The order is going to be T, critique, counterplan, politics.
Speak in the order.
Counterplan, politics, advantage 1, advantage 2. Everyone good? above by no alternative solvency to get any of the corresponding framework arguments. The only thing you have the currency of violence is the consequences means for no ability to generate offers of the permutation simply test of competition counterclaim. Counterclaim is going to be capable of solving 100% of case in addition, 100% of case in addition to solving poor structural balance and poverty within Africa because it's resolving debt issues. This is going to be able to outweigh the non-existent impact that comes off of the China turn, that comes off of the number 3 China turn. The first argument, they said the United States keys because of MedFlag and NGOs with credibility and experience. Okay, I'm going to press Lucky's first solvency argument who says that Canada's increase in contributions in Africa significantly more, and now significantly more to Africa than the United States does, indicates that their infrastructure within the region is far superior. They have more experience interacting with specifically Morocco, like we said, that they're currently in the Western Sahara, whereas the United States is not in there, which means the only ability for us to get into refugee camps in Western Sahara is to do the counterclaim. This is a unique solvency differential, which is a unique reason to prefer the counterclaim, which is unique reason to prefer the counterclaim solvency over the one they see. In addition, we said this increases their credibility within the region because they have longer experience within the region and ability to work with local NGOs and government organizations. Furthermore, I want to supply the increase Africa's been since 2003. I think we're only giving you specific dates in case we should go with our specific analysis next. They say the community is capable of solving the entirety of the app. We can solve for the diseases arguments because Canada has the medical infrastructure, and we can solve for terrorism by being able to solve for poverty. In fact, we solve better. I'll get to that on the soft power turn. They say permutation do both. Two disadvantages of the permutation. The first is in politics is that we'll get to that. We'll go which politics is that which is eventually going to deter case. We'll get to that on that flow. The next argument is that they say that the shield link because of cooperation with Canada. Look, our benefits as Canada is where Canada's trying to increase their soft power right now, but are capable of doing this because other countries are moving in with competition and they're not capable of generating that within the region because of other types of Western influence. We isolate that when Canada's capable of utilizing the infrastructure that they currently have within the region that they're capable of not only solving but generating soft power within the region and becoming the regional prevailing power. This does two things. The first thing it does is it crowds out China, which means when African countries can't get assistance from Canada, less likely to get it from likely get it from China because Canada has better types of medical infrastructure in the case that they will go with them. And in addition, this also indicates that Canada has the G8 to cancel debt forgiveness in Africa. Look, when debt exists in Africa, it simply means that they're constantly in cycle of debt. People have the ability to regenerate the economy or to be able to generate profits, which simply traps them in a cycle of this. This makes terrorism inevitable in a world in which individuals can't access and can't be part of the economy because they're constantly plagued by debt because they have no other option than to join these types of terrorist organizations. In the case of we're controlling the internal lane to advantage two, independent reason to not further permutation. Next, we say that U.S. software is good, is capable of crowding out China. First argument is China influence is increasing within the region. We isolate that China is focusing on China's having to refocus on their own territory within the Asia Pacific in order to counter Taiwan and the new weapons sale of the United States having them as well as the Senkaku Islands, which is happening with Japan, and in addition, all of the nuclear talks that are happening with North Korea, their pivot strategy is to be able to secure that region first in case that Africa isn't their top priority, means that they're not going to be able to do this. Furthermore, we articulate that African countries will want the political soft power benefits of going with Canada in case they will do this. No terminalized impact to your argument except for dictatorships and genocide. The point where the counterclaim is solving back for both advantages. It probably indicates that we're solving back for the root cause of structural balance, which means that new political systems without corruption are capable of taking place and capable of overthrowing these dictators. Don't allow mark extrapolations in this argument. The next argument, you make the U.S. turn back and use and solve debt. Look, the United States does not have debt for this program. We want Africa to stay in debt to us. Canada's the only one that's doing this. This argument, this warrant isn't being argued. Canada's the only one that's doing the debt forgiveness program with the G8 countries. And it's been doing it since 2004. It's a good idea. Politics. First argument on politics, here's the uniqueness argument about Nigeria. We actually think that there's a unique difference between the spending in Nigeria for military bases and military funding as opposed to the spending that is non-military funding. When I see that goes to medical equipment, these things are perceived differently in Congress, and it means that Republicans don't get angry about different types of military spending, but they do get angry about these types of foreign spending that they view as not being beneficial, not helping the United States in any specific way because it doesn't make our military bases in other countries really big or anything. They say that which indicates it wouldn't trade links to this. And in addition, this came out before the proposal from the Gang of 8, which means it wouldn't have traded off with that anyways. Debate over the liberal funding is what trades off. I'm going to press the argument. I'm going to press the unique segment and say that the Gang of 8 is currently proposed a framework. It's going to get passed. The conservatives are on board with it right now. That's our Napolitano argument. You say that Obama's tangled with Obama right now. Look, we don't act like Obama capital is ever being uniquely key. It's ever being uniquely key to the disadvantage. We're saying that what happens on the level of debate is that what happens on the level of debate is that when Congress has to debate about this different types of supplementary funding, it reunites the debate over the types of debt of this age. There's two things. A, it halts debate or spending, and as our internal scenario number one says, pushes immigration reform into the future, which means it never gets solved. But in addition, it means that Republicans are going to try to push for more hardline instances of border security, which means that it's going to get caught up with the committee and never going to be able to get passed, which means we're not going to be able to have the economic benefits coming out of when I see you say that Obama's trading off with Obama already got passed. You say security strategy, political capital, not trading off with Obama. This is a unique argument. These other things can be solved within the interim. This is the only thing that they can backlash on because immigration is the only thing that doesn't make them look like they're trying to block and obstruct politics, which they can't do going into re-election seasons for the senators that are getting elected in 2 years. You say your Boehner argument that said that he doesn't, that the state doesn't like Obama. Look, cross-apply are arguments that say that their Gang of Eight, but Boehner is on board with this Gang of Eight bipartisan commission on immigration reform. He's down with this. He might not like Obama. Obama's not key to the politics they said. You say that Obama's on the line in the sand and that the plan signals fiscal responsibility. Look, the Republicans do not think that spending money on med flags is fiscal responsibility. This just doesn't happen. And furthermore, cross-line, there's no lobbying for foreign aid, which means there's only a risk that it creates conflict. The only risk that it creates conflict. No uniqueness for the link turn. Also, no uniqueness for the link turn means that the link flows in our direction. They get really mad. On to the impact level debate. I don't know about the impact level debate. Which are two things. First, I'm going to say these things internally to the U.S. economy, which means that we're internally to consumer confidence and business confidence, which is uniquely key in order to preserve the conflict in the United States. This is capable of turning case for two reasons. The first reason is because the United States economy's clients are not capable of doing things like funding programs for foreign aid, which means inevitable the one I see will fail within the future. The next argument is that even if we are capable of funding it, we don't have the type of technology or draws to be able to do things like the MIT research that's currently happening on Draco vaccine, which means that increase in immigration is going to be better for disease solvency within the long term. Outweighs in turns case. App. Again, one. Katie's arguments about bacteria and antiviral resistance. Look, what's happening with it is that the virus is mutating. The virus is mutating within. Oh, that doesn't even matter. Okay, go on to the Draco argument. Cross-look MIT, they said the MedPlug people will solve for this uniqueness. Look, and MedPlug people are capable of solving this. So even if that is true, it doesn't mean that Canada can also solve it. But furthermore, we say that MIT is developing this new and better types of technology, which they're going to be able to do if they get the influx of workers that immigration is going to bring, that immigration is going to bring to them, which is capable of solving or the problems in entirety, self-advantage one better than your one I see that's an opposite cost of the plan that outweighs advantage to you. You say no funding trade-off because it's army. Look, we're saying that they don't have the people to do it. They don't have the people in the universities, they're the people within the tech sectors. What advantage to? Look, you say that other places in Africa have terrorism, and you say that the United States has existed in other places in Africa with these type of soft power arguments. It seems to be a causal relationship to me. If Morocco is the only place where the United States is not, and they're one of the unique places that is key to stopping terrorism because it's not there yet, that seems to be a causal link to me that when the United States goes into a country, it generally increases terrorism because it is viewed as Western influences, as uniquely Western, United States influence coming in and trying to promote a unified ideology. This is viewed with a specific lens because of the geopolitical context that exists between countries in North Africa and the United States that is specific to the United States and not necessarily specific to other countries such as Canada. This means that there's only an great indication that this would increase terrorism in the long term. Furthermore, it increases debt forgiveness as internally solving for terrorism.
Boom. Alright. The order is counterplan, and then I'll clean up some things on.
Thanks.
I love you. I'll clean up some things on politics, and then the one I see in order. I'm going to be talking about Advantage 2 in terms of the counterplan, so you can just flow all of those arguments in the counterplan. Okay. Counterplan alone is sufficient for you to vote negative. It proves that the affirmative is not the best policy option in this debate, which means that we don't even need to win a risk of the dissent. Which I think we are, but counterplan. Okay. Only the counterplan is capable of solving. Canada already has people in Western Sahara and Morocco. We're the only ones who have the ability to actually, give them the condoms, give them the sex education, give them any medicine. We're the only ones who are actually capable of doing that. Permutation is not a good idea because Canada can't get enough international credibility to do things like forgive debt when you sap all of their attention and when they look like a pawn of U.S. defense strategy. This means that Canada is incapable of doing all the good things that it does in a world of the permutation. But it solves alone in a much better way than the 1AC. It's capable of solving the entirety of the 1AC. First, because it solves the same drug problem, which means that it solves all of Advantage 1. It also solves Advantage 2 much better because there are no Americans, which means there's not a rallying cry for terror. terrorists. They are just too nice in Canada. I don't know what to tell you. There are no terrorists created by a bunch of people on horses who say, I'm sorry all the time. Additionally, there are...
That's Australia.
That's Australia.
Sorry.
Look, Canada is already there, and we don't see this enormous amount of terrorism increasing, which means that this soft power turn is calculated on advantage too as a disad for the permutation. This risk of a soft power turn, risk of viewing Western intervention through U.S. people coming in and distributing a bunch of sex education condoms is not happening right now with Canadian people in Morocco and Western Sahara, which means that we're capable of solving advantage too, because not only does it not create terrorism, but it also decreases terrorism within the region because we create economic stability. Disad to the permutation. Canadian soft power is better than American soft power. A risk that American soft power creates terrorism is conceded on advantage too. Canada just says sorry about keeping a bunch of countries in economic deprivation and forgives their debt, which is something that the U.S. doesn't have a program to do, whereas Canada has had a moratorium on African debt since 2004. The only way they can sustain this is through soft power, which means that the counterplan is capable of creating and stopping cycles of poverty, which stops terrorism. We articulate debt as the internal link to why terrorism exists in the first place. You join a terrorist organization when you do not have other options of survival, when the only way that you can have access to food to feed your family is through a group that will protect you, a group that will protect your family and will protect your agriculture, which means that terrorism only exists in a world of extreme poverty, which means that only the the debt forgiveness that exists in a world with a counterplan absent the permutation will solve the internal link to your advantage too. Also, we outweigh any net benefit to the 1AC through direct comparison to the effect of U.S. soft power versus Canadian soft power. There's a solvency differential, which is enough for you to vote negative. There's a better option than the affirmative, and it is the counterplan. Politics. If that's not sufficient, I think that you were winning arguments that say that the economy internally linked turns advantage one, and internally linked turns the affirmative solvency. No U.S. economy means no funding for drugs, which means that even if you can solve the instance of your act, you can't solve it residually, which means that your impacts become absolutely inevitable. Terrorism becomes inevitable in a world where we inevitably pull out all of our funding, where we pull out all of the people who are distributing drugs. Also, we will not have the money to be able to do research to get Dracos to go on a larger scale, which means that you don't solve your act. Also, advantage one. Okay. MIT solves your terminal impact of your app. Okay. This Draco, the Draco antivirals that are being developed at MIT are literally 100% effective against every virus because they target the way that viruses regenerate within cells. Like, they target the way that the viruses actually go into every cell, which is the same for all viruses. It is as effective against common colds as it is against HIV, which means that the status quo will inevitably solve your app. There's only a risk that the affirmative creates an instance of soft power that creates terrorism, whereas the affirmative actively decreases it. Yeah.
Alright. Disease, in the counter plan, politics.
Sorry, disease is in advantage one.
Yeah, advantage one. Disease fair. Counter plan, politics, terrorism.
Politics, terrorism. Chill.
Everybody got it?
Yep.
No impact to advantage one means irrelevant in the context of this debate. Won't matter in the way you evaluate it. Go to the counterpoint now. Look, Canada can't get other countries to do this debt forgiveness. You've not made a compelling solvency argument that indicates that other countries would follow along with debt forgiveness. You are just lacking this fundamental piece of an argument about debt forgiveness that is not in the debate from the beginning. You should not evaluate it as solving for debt forgiveness in any context. Canada may forgive it, every other country will not. That's a simple argument as to why you would not be able to resolve this question. More importantly, though, China gives unconditional aid to these countries, which is an argument you were conceding means they would always choose them over Canada. Our argument is that these countries can do literally whatever they want and China will still fund them because they just want a foothold in the region. Your answer is that they're focused on Southeast Asia and not Africa. Our argument is that China has money. They have the ability to focus on multiple regions. In fact, they're doing it in the status quo. They're supporting these dictators with unconditional support, which is an indication of massive turn to the counterplan, devastates the ability to solve back for the net benefit. If your argument is soft power of Canada saved, creates the ability to save these economies and means that these people don't have to go into terrorism and they don't get stuck in cycles of poverty, we're talking about dictators who are massively devastating the ability of these countries to be solvent in the long term economically, but also the human rights violations that come along with that poverty are only propped up by a world where China has the ability to get access to soft power, not counterbalanced by the United States and in North Africa. Probably an indication of a massive disadvantage counterplan, which we would resolve via the inclusion of the United States and via the permutation or the plan in itself, which would resolve any of these questions. And we say cooperation, but all reasons why China would necessarily be able to get access here. You would say, you make the argument of securitization that I've answered. You'd say you want to go with Canada instead because of soft power. Our argument is it doesn't matter because Canada will still put stipulations on them. They have Western ideals about human rights that China does not and does not care about. In fact, they would allow you to do literally anything. All reasons why they'll preference China in this instance, especially the countries that are in less liberalized, always going to preference China means the straight turn to the net benefit, dissaid to the counterplan. Massive dehumanization happens regardless. People stuck in cycles of poverty in Africa, in the world of the counterplan, and in the same way as the affirmative, only the inclusion of the United States at least counterbalances in some meaningful way, which may solve that risk of solving that the net benefit in a meaningful way. That's fine. Politics now. You say military spending and 1AC spending are perceived differently. MedFlag is a military program. You are sending Army doctors, probably not going to be perceived differently, probably just perceived as sending the military to North Africa. But you're also conceding arguments about why. About our selling of rockets to Morocco just in the last week, which is an indication there will be a far worse backlash. And Morocco is actually a hotspot that the Republicans are actually going to backlash on. We're selling them rockets. We're doing a number of policies here. You make arguments about basing, but our argument is this is not about basing. It's about propping. It's about selling. Giving rockets to a country, which probably is an indication of not fiscally conservative policy, which Republicans would have backlashed back. Doesn't help our bases there. We don't have bases. We're just giving their government rockets. Probably an indication there's no uniqueness for this argument, but more importantly, will outweigh massively. You say we're on the brink of economic collapse, which would turn the case because of a lack of funding, but our argument is U.S. involvement in the region alone would be enough to check back the terrorism because of resolve an anti-U.S. sentiment that exists. Not anti-Western, not anti-Canadian, anti-U.S. probably means only U.S. action would legitimize or would illegitimize terrorism. You're conceding a number of link arguments from the 1AC that indicate that only a lack of action allows for terrorism to happen in North Africa. North Africa is only extremist because we have failed to interact with them in any meaningful way. They think that we don't give a fuck about the way that they engage the world, that we would rather prioritize our concerns over theirs and never engage in a meaningful way. Sending troops there would probably resolve, or sending MedFlag there resolves this question. Sends a signal that America can be benevolent, will be benevolent, and in fact probably resolves most of our soft power issues in the region, which we'll highlight on terrorism. And outweigh with. Terrorism now. You say causal relations, the U.S. goes there and terrorism happens. The U.S. is not in Libya, not in Algeria, not in North Africa at all, which is our argument from Jump Street. You're conceding this as a reason why there is an ability of development of footholds in the status quo. This is the only defense you're going for in the block of this dissent. Not good enough in the context of an argument. This is anti-American sentiment because of a lack of intervention, because we're not helping with the problems that exist in North Africa because of a push towards democratization. We're prioritizing our own interest over what we're saying are our ideals, which is the reason why North African countries hate the United States and the quo, and why terrorism exists is beginning to develop a foothold there. More importantly, you're conceding our number 2 internal link argument that says the lack of action legitimizes terrorism. In a world where we don't act to help these people, they will always perceive us as a threat to them. We have to change the way that we interact with people in order to make them perceive us as benevolent in any way, which means we can only resolve anti-American sentiment and the threat of terrorism. If we take action to resolve the problems that are creating terrorism in the long term, would resolve any of this. Impacts of this are far larger because it creates a quagmire similar to Afghanistan and Iraq and the North Africa creates global power wars, which we say even if they don't terminate in extinction are massive deaths of billions.
You're fragile. We need to be gentle.
outside.
Yeah.
I don't even know what that-